Annyeonghaseyo, welcome to Afternoona Delight. We're Leah, Megan, and Amy, three American romance novelists discussing all things K-romance from a writer's lens. We fangirl over our favorite actors and actresses, talk up our trope addictions, and nerd out on K-drama deep dives. We'll throw in a few K-pop and K-skincare recs for good measure, because why not ride the Hallyu wave all the way to shore? So grab some dekboki and listen to your new favorite unis.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hi there.
So actually, there was something I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about it in the run-on episode, and then we forgot. So I live on the East Coast, and it's funny. So I was talking to my husband a little bit about that. On the East Coast, and I feel like I can say this because I've lived here all my life, we're very East Coast is the end-all be-all. Like, we think everything revolves around us, basically, because we think everything should be EST. If someone's like, oh, this starts at, Mountain Standard Time, I'm like, what? Who goes by that? No one goes by MST. Everything's EST. What are you talking about? So to me, when someone says you have an accent, I'm like, no, I don't. I talk normal. Okay. I talk normal English. I don't have an accent.
Run on.
I know. I'm like, Amy has an accent. She's from Chicago. She's got a Chicago accent, but I don't have an accent. And then I started listening. Obviously, we listen to our podcast because we want to know how we sound, and we then praise Amy's excellent editing. So I'm listening to the podcast and I'm like, holy crap, I have an accent. I do clearly say things completely different from Amy and Leah. And it's I'm not.
Right. You're not the be all end all because we say it differently.
It's not that you guys have an accent, it's that we all say things with a different dialect. It's I had to get that through my head. And the main thing was that they were laughing at me because I say run on. Because they say
on?
Run on? Yeah, run on.
So you turn on the lights?
Yeah, I say turn on the lights. And and I don't know, it's just very funny because I never thought about how I said on. I just
Well, let's say it's a signature. It's a signature word you've got.
I guess, but it was just really funny because when I was talking to my husband about it, he was like, we're the worst here on the East Coast because we just think everything revolves around us. We think everything should be ST, and it's so true. And that's why I was like, I need to realize that, it doesn't.
Don't actually think about you on the West Coast?
Yeah.
Or in the Midwest. But you know what would be fun? You could turn our podcast into a drinking game, and every time Megan says on, you take a drink of soju.
You would be drunk in 4 minutes.
I turned on the podcast. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I just never thought about how I said on. And yeah, I think I like the way you guys say on. It sounds so fancy.
On? Very fancy. This is my end.
Simple word, and I'm like, ooh, you guys sound fancy.
Well, speaking of fancy pronunciation, just really quickly. So, my kids are Australian American, but have been raised in the USA, even though they've got their Australian passports. And whenever we go to Australia or they're talking to their grandparents, this has just come up, not recently, but it was on my mind because my daughter's been learning her ABCs and is mastered it now. Hooray. And when you get to the end, it's X, Y, Z. But in Australia, they say Z, which seems really
she
fancy.
Z, yeah.
No, she doesn't. She says Z. But I can see that every time she does it, Nick or sometimes his parents are
yeah, it's a tick. It's
Z,
oh.
Z little one, join the Z side. So it's always funny because now I try sometimes. I'm X, Y, Z. And then she's no. And I'm yeah, I will say it doesn't really rhyme.
Just say that when you said your daughter's learning her ABCs, I forgot for a second that you have a kindergarten daughter. And I was like, she's learning her ABCs because I was thinking
my middle
Bronte. Yeah.
Yeah. You're she's going into 5th grade. Leah.
She reads Korean subtitle shows. So.
Right. So I was like, But well,
to bring it to I guess Korean entertainment, sometimes I watch videos of stray kids who we've talked about on this podcast a lot, and several of them are from Australia. And so it's kind of funny because you can clearly hear that some of the stray kids who don't really speak English, but they're obviously picking up English words, but some of them talk now with a little bit of an Australian accent.
Yeah, because they're learning
it from
their Australian counterparts.
That's what you would do. You'd be picking it up from who you hear it from, which would be
exactly.
But they were talking of how they say no because they say nar, or you probably can.
No.
Yeah,
I can't really do it. It's how Nick would say tuna. He says tuna and tuna. I'm going to have some tuna. And then no, I don't know.
Nick has such a soothing voice though, because you had showed us that like recording he did. I remember that. He does. He should be like a voice actor for kids' books or something. It was very soothing. But anyway.
Unless he's bitching at me about leaving the car door open. Anywho, what are we talking? What are we talking about today?
Villains,
bad guys.
So I have like almost chills to start this podcast. I'm very excited. I think K-dramas do excellent villains, so let's get into it. Nothing makes a good drama great like a well-rounded antagonist. Villains should always be written as heroes of their own story, so they need their own motivations and conflicts beyond just being bad or evil. Author Sasha Black wrote the book 13 Steps to Evil: How to Craft Super Bad Villains. She penned 5 tips for creating believable villains, which will summarize so all of you listening have context on what criteria we here at Afternoona Delight are using to highlight our favorite villains. Number 1. Understand their why. Why are they doing what they are doing? Typically, this is because of past experiences that color how they see the world. So maybe they have always believed their parents favored their older sibling, and so they justify their bad deeds as they're making things fair. Number 2, motive and goal. The goal of the villain is what he wants. And usually it's something tangible, like a job as the CEO of the company or to be crowned king. The motive is why they want it, whether it's money or that they believe they're the rightful heir to the throne. Without a motive, there is no conflict. So think of this equation. Why plus motive equals villain's action, which in turn causes our hero's reaction. 3, make the conflict specific. What is the harm in the villain getting what he wants? It has to be important enough, i.e. mass casualties of innocence, for the hero to step in. Like, obviously, if the only harm is maybe he wants to like tear down some old building that no one cares about, that doesn't really matter. So you want to make the conflict something very big and that people care about so that the audiences root for the hero. Number 4, no tropes from cliches. Cliches would be old and tired details, while tropes are patterns that appear in your genre, such as a magic weapon in a fantasy or star-crossed lovers in a romance. Number 5, make your villain unbeatable. No one wants to read or watch an easy victory, so make him an expert at something like a skilled fighter or technology genius. So we're going to talk about 3 dramas today that gave us villains we felt were very worthy adversaries to our favorite heroes. So please note, we'll have spoilers upcoming for LawLess Lawyer, The King, Eternal Monarch, and Tale of the Nine-Tailed.
And before we get to it, a few friendly reminders. Make sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen so you don't miss an episode. And while you're at it, leave us a review and tell us something you liked about the show today. We aren't just here to talk to ourselves, so want to make sure we're giving you the content you enjoy. Also, follow us on Instagram at Afternoona Delight Podcast for all the show ratings that don't make it on the pod, book recs, behind-the-scenes fun, and generally shameless fangirling. And if you want to message us about anything you heard on the show, email us at afternoonadelight@gmail.com.
So I am going to talk about An Oh-ju, who is from LawLess Lawyer and was played by Choi Min-soo. So to be honest, I've been waiting for this episode to discuss our favorite villains, because after watching LawLess Lawyer, I could not get An Oh-ju out of my head. As much as I really did love the cast, and as much as I loved Lee Joon-ji as the hero, Bong Sang-pil, the character who made the biggest impression on me was An Oh-ju. So he is a toe sock wearing, dirty fighting, murdering, tattooed gangster who rises from the slums to the owner of a successful corporation and eventually is appointed the mayor of the fictional town of Kisung, which is where LawLess Lawyer takes place. So An Oh-ju's why is that he never wants to return to the slums again. It's mentioned several times that he is really trying to rise up from where he was born. And so his motivation basically is he no longer wants to be seen as a gangster. He wants to be a respected and powerful figure in Kisung. So his goal as mayor, he wants to spearhead the Golden City Project, which is a developmental effort. And this will not only bring him wealth, as he made a whole lot of underhanded deals to buy up otherwise worthless property, but he will also be seen as a savior of Kisung. That was also important to it. It wasn't just about the money for him. I mean, it was about the money, but it was also, he wanted the credit. He really liked talking in front of the cameras. So he wanted to be the savior. So the conflict. An Oh-ju isn't the only villain of LawLess Lawyer. He's actually sort of the sub-villain, but to me, he had the best story. So he is essentially the fixer for Cha Moon-suk, who is a powerful judge of Kisung, who has her own ambitions, and she's the ultimate baddie of the drama. So he did all her dirty work, including killing the mother of the hero Bong Sang-pil 18 years ago. Cha Moon-suk is the reason he's appointed mayor, but it also put him on a collision course with Bong Sang-pil, who has returned to Kisung to get revenge for his mother. So An Oh-ju is charismatic and deadly. I honestly cannot get his toe socks out of my head. Okay, so there's a shot where he is at his like desk. That's when he was still the CEO of his company before he was mayor. And he has his feet propped up on his desk. And I couldn't figure out why his feet were blue. Like I honestly like rewound it like 3 times. I'm like, he literally has blue feet. And it's because he was wearing toe socks. His blue toe socks, but they were like tight. And do you know what I'm saying? It didn't look like he was wearing socks. And it freaked me out. And then I realized throughout the whole like drama, he would always kind of be in his office with his shoes off and like massaging his own feet.
Yep.
Nope.
I know. But this is my point though. It was like he had a lot of these weird quirks that made him even creepier. Like the toe sock thing. Like, whose idea was it to give him these toe socks and also have him, like, massaging his feet and his toes like, throughout the drama? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is up there with the mole for me. Like,
yeah, it's so weird. It was so weird. And it happened numerous times. It was like a character. He, like, loved his toe socks. So he had this quirk he did where, or maybe kind of almost like a tick, but he would, like, poke his tongue inside his cheek, but, like, really quick. And he would do it before he talked to you, like, and then he'd start, and he had this like sort of almost like low way of talking. And every time he did it, I would get like chills because I'm like, oh shit, he's about to like kill someone or he's about to do some bad stuff. Like he is bad, guys. Okay. He kills people, he beats them up just if they make him angry. I mean, he is bad. But he also, again, had this very clear motivation. So he is an expert fighter and he has a way of speaking that is just truly transformative. So I've seen the actor Choi Min-soo in real life. Like I've seen some videos of him and he's pretty much like unrecognizable as An Oh-ju. So his motivation to be seen as respected and to overcome his violent past is relatable, especially as the drama progresses. He starts to show some vulnerability. This is what I love about him as a villain is he's so bad. Like clearly, like they're never trying to make him good, but they're also showing his motivation so well. So ultimately, Cha Moon-suk is like a puppeteer pulling his strings, but soon he begins to cut each string on his own and start making his own moves. And that's when he started to be even more interesting because once he was no longer just her, like she called him her dog several times. Like she would say to him, like, you're my dog, which means you don't bite until I tell you. And he basically started biting on his own. And that's also when he got just so much more interesting, when the drama got more interesting, because sometimes he would almost side with the hero, but he still wanted to kill him. It was just really good. So I alternately rooted for him while also wanting to see him pay for his like many past crimes because he was a terrible person. So I do have a favorite scene of his that I want to talk about. One thing I love is when the hero and villain see each other as worthy adversaries. And I feel like, well, it took a while to get there. Oh-ju and Sang-pil began to like begrudgingly respect each other. So they had a relationship where they wanted the other dead, but they wanted to be the ones to do it. Like, you know, An Oh-ju didn't want anyone else to kill Bong Sang-pil. He wanted to do it himself and vice versa. So there's a scene where Oh-ju visits Sang-pil at the hospital while he's recovering from a stab wound. So it is a really tense scene. Both characters are tense and I braced for a fight, worried for, you know, my Sang-pil, my hero, because he was already injured. And then suddenly the hospital lights go off and all the security cameras are shut down and a bunch of black wearing gangsters invade the hospital and they're hired by Cha Moon-suk to take out Sang-pil and Oh-ju, who are both there together. So the best part is that all the gangsters rush in the room and Sang-pil and Oh-ju are just like sitting there and they kind of look at each other and it's just like they speak with their eyes and they're like, let's do it. And they fight side by side. So they take out all the gangsters. They refuse to be killed by anyone else. They take out the gangsters one by one. And I mean, it's like dirty, violent. It's an amazing action scene because like Sang Pil's still in his like, I don't know, his hospital stuff. And they fight side by side as they battle their way out of the hospital. And it's just such a cool scene because they call a truce, but it's completely temporary because they know the next time they meet, they're going to want to kill each other. So I honestly just, I miss the drama. I'm not going to tell you what happens to Anoju at the end. I really think the drama is worth watching just for one of the best villains in K-drama that I've seen.
I love when a villain and a hero are forced to team up. You know, it makes me think of like Kylo Ren and Rey having to team up in whatever the name of the last Star Wars movie is.
Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker.
But
thank you.
I think they team up. They team up.
But they team up more than once, right?
Yeah.
Don't they?
They team up more in the middle one, I would say.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I love when villain and hero have to team up together because then, especially if it's a complicated villain, like you're saying, like Megan, how you kind of understood where he was coming from and stuff like that, and that you get to see his motivation and get to really understand him. And we'll talk about it more when we get to another question later, but this idea of like sympathy and empathy, you know, for a villain. And I think it's possible to have that sometimes, even if you don't agree with them.
Right. And so, I mean, this is the thing about Anoju. Like I said, he was a terrible person, but he talks a lot about how he was born in the slums. He didn't know where his next meal was going to come from. He had no family. And he felt like the only way out was to be a criminal. I mean, that was what he thought he had to do. And I do think by the end, or by probably like the middle of this drama, he did want to be someone else. He was trying to be someone else, but his past wouldn't let him because he had done so many terrible things in his past. And he was still doing terrible things.
Right.
I think he was a little bit in denial, but I still felt for him because there was a point in the drama where he was completely beaten down and had kind of no one, but he was still like, I'm going to fight for myself. Like, I'm going to make my own moves. And I kind of love that too, when he was like, I'm not going to be anyone's dog anymore. You know, I'm my own man. So that's why I felt so conflicted because I was like, I want you to die and like, or at least like go to jail. But I also, like that's just why I just felt so like a lot of times when I'm watching dramas, when they keep showing scenes of the villains, sometimes I'm like, another like scene where a villain's like, you know, steepling his fingers in his office, plotting. And, you know, I kind of like, I feel like those are really repetitious. But the thing with Anoju is I was like, show more of him. I actually want more of the villain because he was making moves. It wasn't just like him he was just so compelling. And so hats off to Choi Min-soo, who played him, because he played the heck out of the character. Like, if you would just watch some clips, you'd see what I mean about the guy's like facial tics. Like, just so freaking fascinating. So yeah, anyway. So my question, Oju was fighting for something he never had, respect and power, while many villains fight not to lose what they already have. So what do you think is more compelling, fighting for something or fighting not to lose something?
Okay, so I think fighting for something they never had because they have this delusion that all will be right with their world if they just have this one thing. You know, the idea of like the grass is always greener. And I feel like that is even more motivating than fighting not to lose what they already have, because a lot of times if villains have something worthwhile, they likely got it through nefarious means in the first place. Like I think about Lee Jae-kyung from My Love from the Star, which Megan, I know you haven't seen it, so I won't talk too much about that. We are going to do a deep dive on that. But he was fighting to keep his place as CEO. But once you see the drama, you see that he only got there by doing some unspeakable things anyway. So that made him sort of one note for me. You know, he was never truly deserving of what he was fighting for. And because of that, the motivation kind of falls flat to me compared to fighting for what a villain has never had. Because at the end, when the villain is hopefully vanquished, it's all the more satisfying that he or she basically never gets to taste that sweet success that they think they deserve. Like kind of like what you're saying about Anoju, you know, this pulling yourself up from the bootstraps kind of mentality, but in the wrong way. And so you know that this person was kind of, you know, pushed into this life, but you feel for them, like you've been saying, but then they keep doing these horrible, horrible things. And at the end, it's like, it's a victory that they lose, but it's also, you have a lot of emotion invested in it.
So for me, I'm going to take another tact, which although I really appreciate, Amy, what you said and think that there's a lot of merit to it. Like when I was thinking about this question, I think what hit me was more the losing what they had, probably because we did do a healer deep dive somewhat recently. And it was making me think a bit about Moon Sik, who I thought was a really great villain. And I think that, like, you know, you had touched on this with My Love from Another Star too, but that idea that, you know, here's a person who basically made a deal with the devil, so to speak, and in doing so gained everything that he could have ever wanted, from fame to respect to the woman he had always loved, except the fact that that entire thing was built on a lie. And then when you start pulling on the house of cards, the whole thing begins to tumble. And I kind of like that desperation of, like, you've done so much and compromised so much that, you know, at that point, you're willing to do unthinkable things to, like, keep it all together. And, you know, in Healer's case, it would be like Moon Sick willing to, you know, keep a sociopathic toady on the payroll with an evil giggle who likes to try to murder young girls in elevators. So yeah, I mean, I think honestly, at the end of the day, my real answer to the question is probably it just depends on the villain and like what their journey is. But, you know, Moonstick had jumped out at me as somebody who I thought was like a complicated villain that I had enjoyed, just because, yeah, I don't think I like found him fun to watch, kind of, Megan, like how you were talking about you relished seeing the villain. I don't know if I relished seeing someone like Moonsick. It was just more that, like, I felt like he was deeply effed up and complicated. And so
yes,
interesting to watch in that case, even though, like, there was no part of me that, like, liked him or was rooting for him.
I totally agree with what you're saying, is that it depends on the villain and how they're portrayed. And in Moonsick's case, 100% agree that he was a fantastic villain, clawing at anything to keep what he had. Yeah, I do think it's how they're portrayed. Whereas in My Love from the Star, the way that that villain was portrayed, he never seemed in danger of losing anything, yet he was still getting everybody out of his way who could possibly be in his way, kind of thing.
Yeah, he was much more one note.
Yeah.
I always love the desperation. Like when the villain is like, either he feels what he wants is like just within his grasp and he just has to make like one last desperate grab, or he knows he's about, or she is about to lose it, and they do like one last desperate act. That's always kind of my favorite moment. I was waiting for it in Into the Ring, which I just finished, and I got it in the last episode, and it did feel good. I just always love when they're desperate. Now that makes me sound like a psychopath, but whatever.
No, I think it's a well portrayed villain when it's that situation. Yeah. So absolutely.
Again, LawLess Lawyer is a really great drama. The romance is most definitely like a subplot, but it was fine. It just wasn't, it didn't like give me a lot of feels or anything. But I loved Lee Joon-gi as Bong Sang-pil. And like I said, if you want just an amazing, complicated villain, check it out.
And not to get all into the recent tea, but I'm wondering when you're talking about like the fact that the romance was kind of lacking. This was the drama that Yeo Seiji was doing during the whole, you know, whatever went down that we don't really know or need to know about between her and Kim Jong-hyun.
Yeah, I'm almost positive this is the drama she was filming. And I mean, it was just, like I said, it was okay. But I didn't feel like either of them were all in on that romance. The care. I feel like they were just like, oh, we're supposed to be together because the script says so. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? It just wasn't that exciting. But it was, again, it was fine. Like, it's not like I disliked the romance. Does that make sense? It just didn't like make me have all these feels. They tried to like put some faded bits into it that just fell flat.
You know, I don't know. I feel like the faded has been played so hard that sometimes it's not my favorite.
Yeah, and this one just fell a little flat, but again, I mean, it was okay. But I'm just saying, it wasn't the best, you know, romantic drama I've ever seen. But as far as action goes, I mean, Lee Joon-gi does some pretty awesome action scenes. I mean, he literally took out like 24 guys by himself in one scene. Completely unbelievable, but I didn't care. It was amazing because he's kind of like a slight man, you know? Like, he doesn't look what I would picture, like, I guess I would say like an American,
like a Nicolas Cage, so to speak.
Oh no! I
Three
mean,
for three.
I'm going every episode.
He's not like Matt Damon or Chris Evans or anything like that. He's very thin, but he's like, I mean, in real life, I know he's like, he's a skilled fighter in many different disciplines. And it clearly shows because he's like incredible to watch in a fight scene. Like, I was captivated watching this man in the fight scenes. And I think I heard he did all his own stunts, and it's like totally believable. I mean, fantastic. So he really played the crap out of his role as well. I mean, he yelled, "Ano Jew!" like throughout the whole thing. Like while I was watching this drama, I would fall asleep at night with like him yelling "Ano Jew" in my head because he yelled it all the time. And Ano Jew would yell "Bangsa Pele!" You know, I think I talked enough about how great it was. So yeah, if you haven't looked into LawLess Lawyer yet, please do, just for Ano Jew.
And now it's time for our favorite segment, our K recommendation of the week. And this week we have Leah with a K skincare rec.
So I want to talk to you all today about a product that I use every night, and it is the freshly juiced vitamin E mask from Klairs, and that is Klairs with a K. And this is a lightweight overnight mask. It is full of vitamin E, which is an antioxidant known to slow down cell aging. I think what I like about it is that it's got this very weird pudding kind of texture to it. So like when you scoop it out, for whatever reason, this brings me great pleasure. It like settles again like this surface that like nothing was marred, you know? Because I kind of always feel like it's a bummer when you open up product and like the stuff you can scoop out and you're like, like, you know, you can tell you've been digging at it like a badger for a while. Like that happens to me with a lot of my cream. Whereas this, it just always looks fresh and new. So I'm always like, oh, how pretty it is. And then it kind of like gets on your face and clings in this way that's like a little bit sticky. So that's why I think it's good for overnight. But it just like, I don't know what it does, but it soaks in, and I just feel like it's a really nice kind of just like full face cream to put on at bed to like wake up with this moisturized, hydrated glow. So that recommendation again, which we are not sponsored for, we just recommend products on the show that we like, is the freshly juiced vitamin E mask from Klairs with a K.
I just ordered it.
I want to try it. I'm totally going to try it.
Well, I will say that this is one product that as I'm starting to like run down on it, I order it because I don't want to run out ever.
So our next villain that we are going to be talking about is Lyrim from The King, Eternal Monarch, played expertly by the fabulous Lee Jung-jin. As you've probably gathered from previous episodes of the pod, I love this drama and have been dying to talk about it in any way, shape, or form. We have a deep dive coming up, and I also mentioned this drama on our most recent snack where we talked about endings we wanted to rewrite. And I'm so thrilled to get to talk about one fantastic part of King today, which is our villain. Also, Lee Jung-jin plays two roles in this drama because there's doppelgangers and we've got parallel universes. So one is the villain, Lee Rim, who is the former king's illegitimate brother in the kingdom of Korea with a C, and his doppelganger, Lee Sung-jae, a man in a catatonic vegetative state in our universe's Republic of Korea with a K. Not only is he playing this excellent villain, but he's playing two roles for much of the drama. So hats off to him. So let's talk about Lee Rim's why. I think I already gave it away. Lee Rim is Korea with the C's royal family's illegitimate son, and that is motivation for many, many villains throughout K-dramas. He can't stand to see his brother, and this is Lee Min-ho's character's father at first. So Lee Rim is the king, Lee Min-ho, it's his uncle. So he can't stand to see his brother as king, not only because he covets the title, but also because he covets a magical flute called the Man Pasak, which can repel enemies, bring prosperous weather, cure diseases, etc. It's a very powerful magical flute. And according to a confession from our villain in the first episode, the flute only appears once every 20 years to bring peace and prosperity to the world. But since the sitting king seemed to not believe in the flute's magic, Lee Rim murdered his brother to take the flute and the kingdom for himself. He tells us all of this while in a police interrogation room in our Republic of Korea, where he claims to have been born in 1951, yet only looks like he is 40 years old because the flute also keeps him from aging normally. So we now know that there is an element of time travel or slowing time down as far as the flute's powers. Basically, Lee Rim's why is very, very clear. The flute. His initial goal in murdering his brother was simply to obtain the flute and all the power that went with it. But his coup goes wrong. When he attempts to kill young Lee Gon, which is Lee Min-ho's character, after Lee Rim has killed his own brother, an unidentified intruder appears to save Lee Gon and foil Lee Rim's plan. The flute gets cut in half, and Lee Rim escapes with his one half. Half the flute has some power, like opening the door to a parallel world, but not enough. So Lee Rim's goal for the rest of the drama is to find and reclaim the second half, making the flute whole. He uses his ability to travel between worlds to manipulate doppelgangers to help him achieve his goal, including making the Kingdom of Korea think he is dead, and it becomes one big mind F of a drama in the best way. But of course, we've got some conflict for the villain. Grown-up Lee Gon is now king, and for 25 years, he's been obsessed with finding out who saved him that fateful night that his father was murdered by his uncle, Lee Rim. He thinks it's our heroine, Jung Tae-ol, played by the ass-kicking Kim Go-eun, because her ID badge was left at the scene when he was rescued. The only problem is that his life was saved back in 1993, and when he finally meets up with Tae-ol in her Korea, Republic of Korea with a K, after he first passes through the bamboo forest gates, she's right around his current age in present day, which should be impossible unless time travel is involved. A big old hot math nerd, Lee Gon continues to investigate and try to figure out how he and Tae-ol are connected, and in doing so uncovers that his murderous uncle isn't exactly dead and that he is planning to stage another coup. But this time, Lee Gon vows to stop him. And as far as what the harm would be in letting Lee Rim get what he wants, if we think about the criteria for a villain and what would be the harm in letting him get what he wants, as in the flute, you can see throughout the drama why someone such as him should never possess that kind of power, because even when he only has half of it, he's a murderous, manipulative madman in the best, most entertaining way. Lee Rim seems unbeatable. He's been using the flute for 25 years and supplanting doppelgangers where he needs them. He's been a virtual ghost up until present day, carefully and methodically planning to take what he lost in his first attempt at the coup. Even when Lee Gon and Lee Rim come face to face in the streets of Busan, the bad guy is right there and should be captured on sight. Lee Rim reveals he has a small army of followers who take aim at civilians in the streets. If Lee Gon fights back, innocent people will die. And so our villain not only reveals himself to his nephew, but also shows that he is, for the time being, untouchable. How can Lee Gon win? And my favorite scene kind of goes along with this idea of Lee Rim being unstoppable. And it's the one that I just mentioned. When Lee Gon is atop his horse Maximus, because of course that is his horse's name, and I love him atop his big white steed. It's nighttime, it's snowing. His security detail has guns pointed at Lee Rim and his goons. It's so tense, and I think such a huge turning point for Lee Min-ho's character in realizing how bad things truly are and how far he will need to go to beat his uncle. So this face-off in the street, I just said face-off. Not Face Off with John Travolta and Nick Cage. But the face off in the street is really, really tense and really beautifully shot. We'll talk a lot about the cinematography of The King Eternal Monarch, but I just love this scene because you're like, oh my gosh, the drama can end right here. Like they can beat the bad guy. And you find out that the bad guy has been planning his revenge in getting what he wants for 25 years. And he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. So I know that you've both seen this drama, so I know you both know who Lee Rim is. And I think Lee Jung-jin, the actor, aside from being fabulous at portraying a villain, is also a very good-looking villain. And so I was thinking, what makes a stronger bad guy or gal? A handsome or beautiful villain like Lee Rim, or someone harder to look at, like, say, someone with a big hairy mole on their neck?
Yeah, I love a sexy villain. And I mean, because I like that, like, kind of conflicting feelings then. Like, I like being like, oh my God, like kind of attracted to them, but yet they're evil. And I also don't love kind of the cliche that evil means ugly or a handicap in some way. And then, good is pretty. I dislike that. So I love it when it's like a super sexy villain because it just feels fun and fresh. And yeah, as a viewer, I like having multiple feelings, So that's my favorite.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, Megan. Personally, I was still kind of set to go with like the healer's elder just because it was a leading question and, that mole of horror really like lives on for me. But okay, so then I started watching a K-drama called Strangers from Hell, which I will be talking about a little bit more on the show. And this is not a spoiler. This is essentially the drama. Lee Dong-wook plays a serial killing psychopathic dentist who dabbles in cannibalism. And y'all, like, Lee Dong-wook is hot, just objectively hot. And we have seen him in many dramas now. And I think, can all concur he is hot. However, he is still hot even when he is plucking up raw strips of human flesh with metal chopsticks and placing them between his perfectly red lips. And with that, my mind was fucked. And I am going to say that good-looking villains mess me up, because this drama, he is so evil, and it's still like hot ass ethereal Lee Dong-wook, and like I feel like my brain is just completely scrambled eggs right now.
So that's my thought too. Like, I like a sexy villain, but I think it makes the whole villain thing even more complex, because how is it okay for me to be attracted to this person when they are doing such terrible things? And this was me, and I can't wait till we get to our deep dive, because this was me the whole way through watching Suspicious Partner, because the extreme talent that is Dong Ha, like, I can't even tell you. He was so methodically bad and murdery. And all I could think the whole time watching the drama is, I want to see this guy as a romantic hero. So I have a thing for sexy villains, but yeah, it makes it a lot more complex, because then I'm like, what is the matter with me that he can do these terrible things? And I'm still like, you are hot when you do those things.
Here's one thing that I just remember this in this conversation, which is, I think that what we are all talking about, though, is essentially, we're not talking about these becoming like anti-heroes. Like, we are recognizing that they are villains in this role. Like, they may be hot and we may be attracted to them, but they are bad. And so even if they're hot, we're not rooting for them, because what this is reminding me of is a book that I know I read, and I'm not sure if either of you read, which was called Push by Claire Wallace. And this was a new adult book that came out around the time that we debuted.
I made you tell me everything about it.
I made you tell me, and I wouldn't read it.
So I'm going to talk about it just really quickly, because I want to make this point, because I think this is an important distinction. Is in this book, the hero is someone named David, who is very cool, collected, sexy, and all 6 of his last previous girlfriends have disappeared without a trace. And we find out that David is a fucking serial killer that murders his girlfriends by binding them up and pushing them off bridges to their death. Spoiler alert. And at the end of this book, because it is a 2-parter, the heroine essentially loves the hero so much that in some ways she is complicit in her own, we know because there's a sequel that she's going to somehow make it, but at the end she's pushed off the bridge, and as she falls into the abyss, she looks up at her beloved's face, who is realizing at that moment, while still smiling because he's happy to be murdering, that he is sad because she's not like all the other girls, and maybe he like doesn't want her dead at the bottom of the river. I don't know. Anyway, I just want to say that like this book made me feel upset, not because I felt like that isn't a story to tell. Like, there's also like, You, which is out. And I will say that like I have unfortunately found like spooky, weird parts of the internet where people like lust after, the hero in You, who is also a serial killer. Yeah. That's a big no for me. But it's an interesting, like, I really enjoyed You as a show. I really enjoyed You as a book even more. And so I'm just trying to say something to the lines of, yes, we're talking about the fact that we like this, but I want to just say that I would say that there's an important distinction that we're making here, where we're not actually then saying like our romantic heroes are also serial killers, and that's just okay. Because
no. Talking about Dong Ha's performance, he was just so good that now I want to see him as a romantic lead in something
100%.
else. Not rooting for him at all.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this for me with Lee Dong-wook too, because I keep being like, oh, I am like super attracted to you, but at this, not your character. Like, I can separate.
Like, I read You as well, and it was a very compelling book, but at no point in reading the book did I root for Joe and want him to not be dead at the end, like.
Right. Yeah. And like, I said that even when I was talking about Ano Ju, like I was rooting for him only up to a point. I wanted him to like break away from like the villain who was like pulling his strings. I wanted him to make his own moves, but I still wanted him to suffer, but I just wanted more for him to suffer for like just the things he did, if that makes sense. Like, but I certainly am with you, Leah and Amy. I mean, I remember us talking about that book way back when it came out, which I just looked, I think it was like 2017. No,
earlier. 2014.
You're right. It came out in 2014. Her last book came out in 2017. Anyway, I remember talking about that. And yeah, that's not my jam. Like,
but I just remember like, and look, full disclosure, like I got into it a little bit with the author, like behind the scenes about the book, because we were in a writer's group together, and I don't know this writer, and they could be a great person, so I'm not trying to like disparage them, but we did have a debate, and the debate kind of came down to me being like, look, this is being marketed as a romance, and I'm having a hard time this is being marketed as a romance. If this was being marketed as a psychological thriller, all set with that. But like for me, I just want to like point out that this feels really problematic, that we're, I was given an arc for it and then told it was like a romance. And I was like, no. Like he literally is a murderer. And then like the argument was kind of like, but can't bad feel so good? And I'm like, absolutely, but it's not a romance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the cover is like a clinch cover, and it still is. So, you know what I mean? Like two people, it's a man and a woman, like almost kissing. So it's clearly marketed as romance. So yeah, nope, that's not for me. But I mean, I love a good villain, but we want a good villain because a good villain makes our hero even better as well.
Exactly.
Like a good villain is going to make, like Lee Rim was fantastic, and he was a great adversary for Lee Gon. And I liked Lee Rim because he was very smart. Very, very smart. As much as sometimes when I'm watching a show, I'm like, oh, why can't the villain be stupid so the hero can win? But that's not really what we want. We want to, again, as I read at the beginning of the podcast, Sasha Black said, you got to make your villain a little bit unbeatable. He can't just like fall with, one like little punch or something like that, or one little, I don't know, something else that is a battle, like a computer keyboard click. I don't know. You gotta, he has to be somewhat unbeatable. And Lee Rim was that.
And Lee Rim being unbeatable helped elevate Lee Gon to much badassery in the later episodes of the drama.
Correct. We got the best scenes because Lee Rim was such a good villain. Because it did, you're right. It made, because I said at the beginning that the villain's actions are what make the hero react, usually. So that's the thing. Lee Gon's reactions were so amazing because Lee Rim had the great actions first. Whew. Writer speak.
There you go.
So, okay. For me, I ended up going with a bad guy that is a little bit one note, but I feel like I'm compelled to defend my choice as well. So I am going with the villain, Lee Tae-ri, played by Lee Ryong, and that is Imugi from Tale of the Nine-Tailed.
Imugi!
We haven't said Imugi in so long.
We haven't. And that's where I was going along on this other track, and then I'm like, you know what?
Now let's do it.
Speaking of villains that like I could get it with, let's go back to Imugi.
Let's do it.
So Imugi, for those of you who have not watched Tale of the Nine-Tailed or may not know, because I had to learn that, it's part of Korean mythology. They are serpentine creatures who look quite a lot like dragons, except they're more like serpenty. They're not real dragons, and they must survive 1,000 years before they can ascend to become a true dragon. In Korean mythology, they're described essentially as dragons in training. But our Tale of the Nine-Tailed Imugi wasn't always this like serpenty dragon in waiting. Here's the tea about him. Back at the end of the Silla dynasty, there was a noble family who had a ninth son. However, the baby was born deformed, and they abandoned it by throwing it into a cave where plague victims were kept. So nice all around. We have a cave full of plague victims, and we're just going to throw a baby in there. Things get better or worse because the baby was eaten in the cave by the plague victims in an act of cannibalism. So time goes on. The plague victims apparently were not sustained much by the baby, and they die, and the cave becomes a tomb. The baby boy's soul is then reborn in the cave as some sort of a white snake, and the people who saw it started calling it the Imugi. And so basically, this sad little boo was reborn as a spiritual snake being who tried to become a divine dragon, but failed for some convoluted reasons. So I'm not sure if you all picked up in the show why it hasn't ascended into a real dragon. I've read some things that like Imugis like cannot be seen by humans. If they're seen in that 1,000-year period, then they cannot ascend. I don't really know, because as we see in our episode, Tale of the Nine-Tailed, 9 WTFs and 9 hell yeahs, there were many WTFs, and much of Imugi is tied up into these WTFs. So I don't really know what's going on with Imugi and why it's not a dragon. Let's just roll with the fact that, like, at this point, the why is that Imugi's been through some shit. Now he's basically just a corrupted demonic serpent being. He was a cannibalized baby that became a serpent who couldn't ascend to become a dragon, but he knows he's better than that. Deep down, he feels he is meant for greatness.
So Mugi's reading some self-help books.
Yeah, I mean, Mugi's like, okay, what is it? The Stuart Smiley from Saturday Night Live. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people don't like me. So I'm going to fuck up the world and become the god of it. So that's basically the why. I mean, like, it is a bit of like a Sauron or like, ultimate baddie bad guy. But like, you know what? I can live with that sometimes. There's a place for those kind of bad guys. The goal is that Imugi wants to unite his body. He's currently split. This is a whole other thing. So if you don't know, go listen to the other podcast or settle up and watch the drama. So 90% of himself is in this male body that is calling himself the intern Terry. And then 10% of his body is lodged in the body of Gia, who is the heroine of Tale of the Nine-Tailed. He wants the nine-tailed fox or Gumio, Li Yan, to sacrifice his mountain god body to save Gia. Then Imugi will get that god bod and have all the power, rule the world, and everything will be death and plague and suffering, just like Imugi likes it.
God bod!
So, god bod is my new favorite thing.
Oh my God, Leah!
Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate this.
I appreciate it so much.
So the conflict is that he's a fast-growing, immortal being of pure evil who is currently moonlighting as an intern named Terry for a ghost hunter type television show where his son Bae is the heroine and does not know for most of the drama that she has part of his body inside of her. So he wants to be able to go around and keep doing his evil world-ending biz, but keeps getting roped into company dinners. Then he kind of sort of tries to woo Gia as this bride of darkness on a rooftop, but she's not feeling it. And later she ditches him and jumps into a cab to escape him. So he has the power to kill all of Seoul with plague rashes and bloody eggs lodged in throats. Again, random, watch the show or listen to the podcast. But the girl who has part of his soul lodged in his body is not going along with his plan to use that bait to gain the body of her. I don't even know. There's so much body happening. And basically, she just can hail a cab to like escape his clutches. Like, what I'm trying to say is he's supposed to have so much power. And then she's like, like, intern, not feeling this right. Oh, and then she like starts to be like, oh, you're kind of the bad guy. Like, there's something, like, I kind of know you're a Mugi. I'm going to just get in this cab. And Mugi's like, oh, well, she got in the cab. So shit, he's out of here.
I just have to say, I've seen this drama and I'm still a little lost right now because it's so much WTF-free. I'm kidding, but like I'm not. Like
no, I know. So, and I'm kidding actually, because Imugi's real conflict is that he hates the shit out of Li Yang, who beat him once 600 years ago and seems like the only being on Earth that could be capable of beating him again. Li Yang also values human life. So Imugi just decides that, what he's going to do is fuck up everyone in Seoul. And there's going to be plagues of hives and bloody eggs and throats. And Li Yang is going to have to like fix that. We don't need to know the why. We don't need to know why there's eggs and throats. We just know we got to fix it. So anyway, my favorite scene is literally anything that just has intern Imugi with his blank-eyed, creepy smile and bowl cut, wearing a lanyard and being bossed around by his son Bae, who has part of his soul lodged in her body. Just anytime that happens, I'm into it. Again, we all know we don't all. I don't know if a listener has listened to the past podcasts or not, but Tale of the Nine-Tailed is one of the most batshit dramas that I've seen to date, nay, the most batshit. And I urge you all to go back and listen to our 9 WTFs and 9 Hell Yeahs from this drama, because honestly, I think it's still one of my favorite podcasts. And I still don't know if it even makes sense.
I remember when Amy edited it, she's like, I had to edit out like a solid 10 minutes of wheezing because we were laughing so hard. I remember I almost peed. I was dying laughing because like I was like confusing myself like while we were trying to describe it.
It's basically the bad guy wants bodies and he is in bodies and there's just lots of like I need to get this body back to my body so that I can get this other body.
And even though 80% of his spirit or soul is in Terry's body, it seems that the 20% that's in Gia is the more powerful, which we find out like later on, which makes zero sense.
Yeah. Anyway, go back and listen to that. But here's my question, is that when a villain has a sad origin story, does it make them more sympathetic? Do you agree with the idea that villains are made, not born?
I do love a good origin story. I do think if it's a sad origin story that I will possibly have some sympathy for the villain. I don't find Imugi's origin story to be, even though he was eaten, I don't find his origin story to be enough to make me emote for him. But I really do love a good origin story. And I do think it makes a villain more sympathetic when we do know where they kind of came from. It doesn't excuse their villainy, but when you know why a villain is the way he or she is, you do, or at least I do, tend to sympathize more if and only if their origin gives us a glimpse into the person not being a villain, but sort of forced into it, like kind of what Megan was talking about with LawLess Lawyer, if that makes sense. Lee Rim in King is a great villain and has great motivation for being the villain that he is, but I in no way sympathize with him because no one did him dirty in order to turn him that way. He was just the jealous bastard who wanted what was never rightfully his and went to, all lengths to get it and killed lots of people. So yeah, I do love a good origin story. It won't always make me sympathize with the villain, but if it is an emotional origin story, then sure, I'll have some emotion invested in it, but I still don't excuse their villainous acts.
K-dramas love their bastards.
They do.
So many dramas with like evil bastard children that grow up to be evil bastard adults. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I love a good origin story. I love in either dramas or I think it's done a lot in American movies, American like horror or whatever, where they'll show kind of the turning point on why the villain kind of turned bad. Like usually there's kind of like one sort of catalyst, or a series of things that led up to it. And I always love that. I always do want to know a villain's motivation and showing maybe something that happened to them as kids or something like that. I mean, because there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. So I think I can like sympathize with a villain, but not feel what they are feeling.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I can like sympathize with their motivations, but also still want them to suffer for what they've done.
As you were saying this, I just realized something which is interesting. So I wrote it down really fast so I didn't forget, but I guess you were done talking. So anyway, segue. One thing where the bastard is flipped really interesting, though, is in Crash Landing, because Seri is the bastard. And instead of becoming the villain, she's actually the hero, and like the true born brothers are actually the baddies. So that's kind of
right.
You haven't seen it yet. Also, Airs. Lee Min-ho's character is a bastard as well, and he is not a villain.
Good job, K-dramas, for being nice to the bastards.
Yeah, so there we go. I'd say it's normally a convention, but yeah, like when it flips, it can be good.
No would like a word.
And yeah, I was thinking like, I kind of wish there's lots of things I wish happened in Tale of the Nine-Tailed, but it would have been nice to have seen like a little bit of a flashback. We get Imugi's backstory just through like his deadpan delivery of his backstory. So yeah, I'd say that I wasn't having like a lot of emotional reaction. I do wish we kind of could have had some flashbacks of like, the baby, like zooming in on like the eye of the baby, like, oh no, like it's all going wrong for me. I would have maybe felt a little worse, but like, yeah, that didn't hit me. A bad guy, not K-drama land, but like a bad guy whose origin story has kind of always gotten to me. And it's not just because it's Tom Hardy, is Bane from Batman's The Dark Knight. I felt like he had a pretty good origin story for being a bad guy of, being raised in this hellish prison in the desert and not being able to like see the light until he was an adult. And then kind of like joining forces with like this other baddie is kind of like her protector. And that's a time I could think that I had sympathy because of the backstory, even though he was like a murderer in like modern times. His path was...
I adore Bane. Like, Bane's terrible. And he like blows
it's like
up
that problematic crush. Like, I know that it's like in real life, Leah like doesn't want to get with Bane, but like in imagination life.
I mean, as Tom Hardy, like Tom Hardy is like, everything. So I agree. Bane and the movie, The Dark Knight Rises, I thought it did a really great job. I mean, that is one thing that, comics do very well, is they really do a good job with their villains. And I thought Bane was fantastic. I mean, I thought he was more compelling than Christian Bale's
Oh yeah, by a
Batman.
long shot.
Yeah, and I mean, Bane was the star of that.
Well, Tom Hardy is a good villain. Tom Hardy
my
was a good villain, and
So good.
I'm just blanking on whatever the Leonardo DiCaprio star vehicle was that he finally got that Oscar for.
Oh,
the bear one.
Resonant, Reza something. Resonance?
Revenant.
Revenant. I'm like, it's the bear.
And then Peaky Blinders. Tom Hardy is an amazing villain. Oh my God. Probably my favorite Tom Hardy villain is the Peaky Blinders villain.
Oh, Peaky Blinders
Peaky Blinders full stop. I feel like that is a show, not Kdrama, that like I think everyone should watch.
Yes, that was probably the one show that I watched that I felt could hold a candle to like some of the K-dramas. I adore Peaky Blinders. And I mean, most of it's like Cillian Murphy because he is just so freaking good. And all the villains in that show are good. So we are going to bring up now some honorable mentions. So we want to say the drama first, just because these might be a little spoilery. We already mentioned Suspicious Partner, but the villain that all three of us really enjoy, his name is Jung Hyun Soo, and he's played by Dong Ha.
We'll talk a lot about him when we get to that drama. He's fantastic, but I don't think there's a lot that we can say right now without
Agreed.
Huge spoilers.
Yeah, let's wait and talk about him, but let's just say he's amazing. And we're going to be talking about Suspicious Partner in a few weeks. So if you want to watch Suspicious Partner, we all recommend it. It was a really great drama. So watch it so then you can enjoy the villain with us and then you can talk about it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the biggest reasons why I didn't choose him for this episode is because you can't talk about him without ruining that entire drama. And I didn't want to do that.
And another hero I want to mention, oh God, no, not hero, horrible villain that I wanted to mention is from a drama that I probably will be referencing an awful lot on the podcast moving forward, but we will not deep dive because I am not willing to traumatize Amy for the rest of her life.
Thank you.
I am hoping Megan will watch it though. And that is Strangers from Hell, which I am 15 minutes away from finishing. And Lee Dong-wook plays Seo Moon-jo, the psychopathic, murdering, cannibalistic dentist. And yeah, I think it's an amazing performance. It's kind of like the villain is horrible, but kind of like this chaotic evil that is almost like that idea of like our villains made, not born. You'd almost say that like given the high pressure, high stakes, dog eat dog world of like modern Seoul, that a character like Seo Moon-jo in the shadows is kind of like that chaotic anarchist evil that is there to like help people who live in shadows, who are not seen as, they're the outcasts of society, kind of bringing them together in a way that gives them power back. And that power is through murder. And so, yeah, whatever, like if you're into making bracelets of human teeth and dingling them around in your torture dungeons, like Lee Dong-wook really just commits to that.
Okay, and so I think I've mentioned now in the last two podcasts that I'm obsessed with An Byo-hyun, and he is the villain or one of the villains in Itaewon Class. And I want to give him an honorable mention because I adored him. So he and his father are the villains in Itaewon Class. And his father, he was a well-done character as well. He had a great why, great motivation. They get into his origin story. And as much as I disliked him, he had a very good, believable origin story. Like I understood why he made the decisions he made, but his son was more complicated. So his son was played by An Byo-hyun, and he was so complicated. And part of it was because of his upbringing. And anytime they show a villain who's like shaped by their parent in a negative way, that always hits me really hard. So the origin story of Gwan-wan was, right away that he's the villain. So this isn't like any sort of spoiler, and I'm just going to say that there is a scene that involves a chicken. And I see this mentioned tons on like blogs. So I don't really think I'm saying anything that's too spoilery, but that scene with him and a chicken I don't know how you can watch that scene and not feel very conflicting emotions for him, because he's kind of a bad person and he's probably not going to ever be a good person, but you also are still really sympathetic about how he was raised. And so it just, it was rough. It was rough. I mean, I do think that there's a point with villains where...
What does he do to the freaking chicken? Just tell me.
Well, he kills the chicken. He has to kill the chicken.
Oh,
but
okay.
This is the thing. There's nothing... I mean, I eat chicken. There's not So I'm just going to explain the scene because it's not really that spoilery. So, people like kill animals to eat them. So it's not, but the point wasn't to kill this chicken to eat it. His dad basically takes him to like the chickens outside and is like, you need to understand that I forget the words that are used, but essentially he's saying you have to, like, you're the predator and you can decide what to do with the prey like that, and you can decide to kill them. And what he's basically saying is, we are the predators. Like, we're rich, we're powerful, and we can decide the lives of the little people. So like, the poor or the less fortunate. So he's like, you need to kill this chicken. If you want to be the CEO and you want to be my son, you need to kill this chicken. And he's in high school at the time, and he doesn't want to do it. I mean, the scene is acted so well. He doesn't want to kill the chicken, and it's really traumatizing. And he does. I mean, he like snaps the neck of the chicken, and he like lets out this like agonized cry, but he's like also trying to be tough. Like, he's trying to be like, yeah, I can do this, but it's also just a little desperate. It's acted so well. It's just fantastic. So all throughout the drama, you're like, oh my God, like, did you have a chance? But I always think that there's a point in the villain's life where they decide if they are going to kind of grow up. Like, there's a decision where, okay, am I going to keep letting how I was raised dictate moving forward, or am I going to be a better person? And there was a point in Itaewon Class where Guan could make that decision, and you have to watch the drama to see what he chooses. But I always think those are interesting points in a villain's life as well. And that was, so Itaewon Class I had some issues with overall, but not with An Byo-hyun's character. I actually, again, found that villain was a really great part of the drama.
And we have some villains that we didn't love, but we want to give them mentions and kind of to give the idea of why. And there's not really much to say except that these were kind of one-note villains.
First one that I gave as a shout out to, look, I thought that the actress did a good job with what she was given. I just think that the character was not very well developed. And that comes from, it's okay to not be okay. And that is Park Hae-young-ja, aka Evil Mom, aka Nurse Face Off. Because spoiler, I'll give you 3 seconds to split ahead if you don't want to listen to the spoiler. 1, 2, 3. She essentially escapes kind of the quasi murder that her husband tried to offer for being, I guess, psycho. And yeah, she got her own face off and like completely plastic surgeryed herself into a new person, and has been living and working in her hometown for quite some time, and no one knows who she is.
But there was no backstory.
No, there's no reason that why
Yeah.
she was a psychopath who wanted to raise her daughter to be a psychopath.
Right. And even less depth would be Gu Junpyo's mom in Boys Over Flowers. Like, she just is an evil, controlling mom, and for no apparent reason than just, we're rich. This girl you like is not. I don't want her in your life. I have plans for you, and you're going to do what I say. And no backstory, no reason why, and never ever shows affection for her son, even when he is in the hospital with amnesia.
And okay, just two other points. Well, one other point to this that I do want to bring up is that we find out she's been hiding her comatose husband
I forgot.
for the entire show, and Lee Min-ho thinks his dad is dead, but just kidding, he's just like comatose in the secret room. And then he like wakes up at the end, and the only time we see her and we assume that things have gotten better, she's like watching him on TV at one point, like coming into his own with her husband next to her on the couch, like laughing. Right? Like that was so like
weird.
her resolution.
So weird.
But in Meteor Garden, which is like the most recent remake of that Boys Over Flowers story, we have the evil mom too. But I felt like at the end, they kind of gave her at least, I mean, it's not super satisfying, but they gave her some reasons as to why she's been acting like this. And then she essentially kind of hits this like eat, pray, love, like, well, now that I can trust you, I'm handing over the company and like off to travel and see the world and take an extended vacation because I'm worth it. And I mean, like, look, that's all it needed was something like that. Like somebody clearly with Meteor Garden was like, whatever happened with that other character, like, no, just no.
Yeah, so the villain I didn't like was the evil ex-girlfriend from 1% of something. And I have to be honest, that character, the way it was written, ruined the entire drama for me. And I think I gave it like a 2 or something, because while the romance was okay, the conflict with the villain was just so contrived that it just ruined it. She was very one note. She just wanted the hero back so they could like merge their companies, but they didn't show anything of her. She just kept showing up to the company being like, let's get married. And he was like, no, I don't want to. And it was like really repetitive. And then at one point she like, I mean, there's no point in me even saying spoiler. Like, in my opinion, the drama was whatever, but she like kidnaps the heroine, and it's like so stupid. Like, because he's like, what did you expect to happen? Like, it was just like, it was really just stupid. It was stupid. That's all I gotta say. And she was just so boring as a villain. I wish they would have done literally anything else to create conflict in that drama other than her.
Okay, well, why don't we close things out by talking about some romance book recommendations that have noteworthy villains?
Okay, so I am going to recommend a book that I feel like it's a little bit of a bait and switch, because it's a trilogy again, and it's a villain who eventually becomes a hero. So whatever, I'm just doing it because it's a good book.
I'm doing it too.
Okay.
So it's all right.
So I am recommending the Captive Prince series by C.S. Pacat. This is one of my favorite trilogies. And part of the reason I think it's so good is that the villain who becomes a hero is essentially like part of this fictional court called Vere. And he's beautiful, he's manipulative, he's deadly, and he becomes the master of basically like a slave that he is allowed to do with whatever he wants with it. Like all privileges entailed, although he doesn't do much with the slave except for like be a real dick to him all the time. And we find out that the slave, well, because we're in like the slave's POV, is Damon, who is this warrior hero who is heir to another throne, which is the arch enemy of Vere, which is, I think it's called like Akielos. And after his half-brother seizes power, another one of those bastards coming to get power, Damon gets captured, is stripped of his identity, and is sent to become the slave to the prince of an enemy nation. And his big drama is that he actually killed Laurent, our villain prince's brother, in battle some time ago. And it's a love story between them. Eventually, like they fall in love. But Laurent has had a very difficult and horrible childhood at the hands of his uncle, who's the regent, and has been very twisted and is essentially kind of like just fighting for his own survival in the court. And so you get more reasons why he's kind of such a dick as the books go on, until eventually like he kind of like comes into his own through love and changes, and they can like team up to like defeat the real baddies. So that is Captive Prince trilogy by C.S. Pacat.
And I'm kind of going along the same lines with like, because we're talking about books that have romance in them. I like the idea of a villain who can possibly turn into a hero. So I'm doing Cruel Beauty, which is by Rosamund Hodge, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I'm going to read the blurb because it's been years since I've read this book, but it was the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking of a book with a good villain that's also a romance. And here it is. Betrothed to the evil ruler of her kingdom, Nyx has always known that her fate was to marry him, kill him, and free her people from his tyranny. But on her 17th birthday, when she moves into his castle, high on the kingdom's mountaintop, nothing is what she expected, particularly her charming and beguiling new husband. Nyx knows she must save her homeland at all costs, yet she can't resist the pull of her sworn enemy, who's gotten in her way by stealing her heart. So in this book, our heroine Nyx is promised to this beast that sort of lords over the kingdom that everybody's terrified of. She's promised to him when she is old enough to be wed in exchange for, I believe it is a sibling's life. So basically her parents like trade her for another sibling. And she is raised to be an assassin because the whole kingdom is kind of being held captive and lots of bad stuff is going down because of this beast in this weird sort of haunted castle. And as soon as she turns 17, which is when she was supposed to be handed over to him, she has to willingly just go to him and marry him. And it is weird and twisted. I guess it is considered a teen novel because our heroine is 17, but it doesn't read like one to me. And Leah, I think you read it too, so I hope you can agree that it doesn't read like a YA novel. It definitely has you guessing who is really the bad guy throughout, kind of thing. And it is a very complicated hero / villain type of situation with the Beast, as is all Beauty and the Beast tales. But this is really well done and very, very different than any sort of Disneyfied version.
Okay, so this isn't really a romance, and I don't really care because this is my favorite villain of anything I've read. So yeah, my favorite villain of all time pretty much is Jaime Lannister from the Song of Fire and Ice series by George R.R. Martin, most commonly known here in the States as the Game of Thrones series. I'm not talking about the show, okay? The show is like Voldemort. We don't talk about it. But the books... So I know that the series is not over. I don't care because in my mind, I've already written Jaime's entire story. But he is a total villain. I mean, he is a villain. I mean, in the first book, he like pushes a child out the window and paralyzes him for life. But Jaime has really fascinating motivations. I love the fact that he's been labeled the Kingslayer and is sort of dishonored, but yet his reasons for slaying the king actually were noble. I know that he has sex with his twin. I know.
Gosh, really? We're into like a lot of incest on this show.
I know. Lately. Sorry. We talked about incest last. I know. He is a true villain, but I don't, in the show, he ended a villain, but I don't know. I think he does have a redemption arc, like George R.R. Martin has started a redemption arc. Part of me isn't sure if he's still going to end fully redeemed. I don't necessarily think he will, but I do think he'll have a satisfying ending in the books. But he's just my favorite villain of all time. I was looking through my romance books and I just couldn't, nothing stuck out to me. And I was like, I guess got to talk about Jaime because Jaime Lannister is my all-time favorite villain that I've read ever. I pretty much kept reading those books for him and Jon Snow. So yeah, that's it. So Game of Thrones, Jaime Lannister.
So what's everybody watching right now?
So I just finished Into the Ring and I am going to make Amy and Leah watch it because it was such a true gem. I feel like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, and it was really delightful. The romance was really slow burn, and on the surface, I didn't think I would like it. It's basically like about a woman who's running for her like town council, and I'm like, like local politics, but it's not really what it's about. There's so many universal themes, and I would call it a small town romance or small town drama with a romance. That is what it is. There is just so much you care about. You care about all the characters, all the townspeople. You're rooting for the heroine the whole time. She reminded me a lot of the heroine in Suspicious Partner. She has so much guts. I mean, she's just really fantastic. And I loved how there would be like dialogue or events that seemed really meaningless. And then as the drama went on, you realize, I said on instead of on. Did you hear that?
Nope.
Okay. As the drama went on, you realize that like even like one word choice was said for a reason. And so it felt like there were a lot of like Easter eggs thrown in and a lot of like, I really enjoyed that. It felt very smart to me. And yeah, and the romance itself was very sweet. I mean, I adored it very much. The hero was basically the most perfect life partner. Supportive life partner I've like seen. He was like Ryan Gold, very non-toxic and supportive and lovely. So next I'm going to watch My Love from the Star because we're going to be doing a deep dive on that. So I'm starting that like ASAP.
I am watching nothing right now. So I finished Suspicious Partner over the weekend and I have had a crazy week and haven't had a chance to start a new drama. But next on my list is When the Camellia Blooms, which we will do a deep dive on early this summer. I'm looking forward to that.
My sister is watching it right now and loving it, which makes me so happy.
Yay!
So I have, like I said before, like 20 minutes maybe left on Strangers from Hell. And I'm just going to do like a quick bio of it because I think that we will not be deep diving it. But for those of you who do like psychological like thrillers, this is probably like up there with like the top of the tops. And so we just did a deep dive on Run On where we talked about the actor Siwon. So Siwon plays a young guy in his 20s who moves from the countryside to Seoul because his college friend offers him a job. And while he's looking for a place to live, he really has like no money. He stumbles upon this place called Eden, which is a cheap hostel that shares the kitchen and bathroom with other residents. It is very, very tired. It has no air conditioning. It is very, very hot in Seoul. He's really not thrilled about the quality of the place or the other residents who seem rather abnormal, understatement, such as his next door neighbor, Seo Moon-jo, who is a charismatic dentist who works and owns a very nice dental practice. So it seems very odd he's in this absolute shithole of a cheap hostel. Nevertheless, Siwon decides he's got no money. He's going to put up with everything for 6 months, save money to move out. However, shit starts to go down.
Like some killing.
And then when this is over, I'm kind of debating. I do want to watch 100 Days by Prince, but I think Megan was up for that. So we might buddy watch that together. Amy has been wanting to watch Reply 1988, and we're talking about maybe doing a buddy watch about that in summer. So that I'm kind of kicking off for, another bit. So I think right now it's either going to be for me, Vincenzo getting on that bandwagon. I think it's called Mi Sang, which has Siwon again. I guess I'm turning into like a Siwon fangirl. And it also has Kang Ha Newell or Flower of Evil. So it's going to be one of those three. It's just going to depend on my mood. I think I might wait on Flower of Evil just because I just had a lot of murdering. And so I think I might go for, not that Vincenzo doesn't, but it's a different kind of murdering when it's mafia.
Right. Yeah, I think Flower of Evil, I heard it's fantastic, but I think it's pretty intense. Whereas Vincenzo, I have heard, has a lot of like humor, which I'm like, as soon as I know the last episode is airing, I will watch Vincenzo. I'm all about it. I just want to be able to binge it because you know me.
Yeah, I think we're really close. That's why I'm willing to jump in, but I'm not sure. So anyway, that's what I've got right now on the My Drama list. I pulled it up to see.
And next week, I am so excited. We are finally going to deep dive The King, Eternal Monarch. So I'm talking about Lee Min-ho a lot these past couple of episodes, and I am enjoying it immensely.
I can't wait to talk about Maximus and Woo Do-hwan.
Oh my gosh, Woo Do-hwan. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna, just like I hijacked her private life with Namugi.
Well, let Amy have some Lee Min-ho time.
No, I know. Amy gets her.
Waiting.
Yeah, you're right. That's only fair. Amy gets to have her complete Lee Min-ho. But I did love him too. I mean, him on Maximus is just something else.
And we'll talk about that next week.
Yay!
So that is it for today, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us.
Annyeong.
Kamsahamnida. Thank you for listening to Afternoona Delight. Make sure to subscribe for more great K-romance conversation. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Afternoona Delight Podcast for more information on our podcast, behind-the-scenes photos, and of course, pics of our favorite oppas and anis. Annyeong!